The talk today is not a campaign speech. It's actually an educational talk on constitutional money. If we go to the next slide. And the first question is what is money? And for a lot of people, this is actually kind of an interesting question. Usually what you hear back is, oh, it's something you can use to buy stuff with. But that's part of the answer, but not everything. Next slide. Money is an invention of mankind. And the way that it works is it's a medium of exchange. And that's its primary function. So, yeah, it is sort of to buy stuff. But it's also a unit of account. If you have a business and you start the year off with $100, and at the end of the year you have $110, you made a profit of 10%. People use it for calculation. It is also a store of value. You can take money and you can use it on a rainy day. The principle of money actually comes from the free market. And what money is, it's actually referred to as indirect exchange. And first let me explain what direct exchange is. Direct exchange is also known as barter. Right. So if you are exchanging, say, oranges for nails, you are bartering. Now things become very difficult when, let's say, you want to have apples, or you want to have somebody work on your house. So what has evolved over time is money. People have used lots of things as money. World War II concentration camps, they used cigarettes as money. And the prisoners would trade those around to get things done. In 17th century Virginia, tobacco leaves were used as money. But the main prime use, or one of the, throughout time, actually what is money and what mankind has chosen as money are two things: silver and gold. That's what our founding fathers put into the Constitution, which we'll get to in a second. Next slide. There are four types of money. The first is commodity money. Commodity money would be any good, such as silver, gold, tobacco, even shells, whatever people decide to use to exchange. The second type of money is called receipt money. What receipt money is on the front page of them. We used to have this up until, I guess, 1933. You would get a bill, just like the dollar bill, but it would say payable to the bearer, 1 ounce of silver, or 1 ounce of gold. So this piece of paper is kind of an IOU. It could be used in lieu of it. And if people would go to a bank, they could demand and be given the actual money, which was silver or gold. The third type of money is called fractional commodity money. We'll get into this a little bit later, but it's pretty much just a portion of commodity money. The fourth type is what we have, which is called fiat money. What fiat money is, if you take out any bill, I actually have one here, and take a look at it, it says a couple of things. It says a Federal Reserve note. What is a note? A note is a promissory note, and what that is an IOU. It is not actually money. Now what do you actually owe? You owe the Federal Reserve $1. This is not backed by anything. There is no gold backing up until 2 years ago, and I did actually go to school around here. I actually thought the dollar was still backed by gold. There is no tie to anything. It's just literally a piece of linen and paper. What fiat means is it means by decree. So what the government says is they demand that this piece of linen, or this piece of paper, or the electrons in your bank account is money. That's all that's there. Next slide. So there are requirements for sound money. The first one is that money must be durable. For instance, like if you tried to use eggs as money, like chicken eggs or what have you, that would not work because they would spoil over time. Money needs to be portable. If you decide to use iron as money, it would be hard to actually carry around this big lump of iron wherever you go. The third is that money must be easily divisible. We can use we'll use a $100 bill for this example. If we only had $100 bills going around the country, it would be very hard to use because the purchasing power of a unit is too high. The fourth is that money must be recognizable and it must be uniform. So, you know, even if you have like gold or silver, if you have like a piece of jewelry that has like 70% gold and you need to weigh it, that's not really recognizable, it's not really uniform. The fifth is very, very important, which is stable purchasing power. The dollar has no stable purchasing power. Since 1913, when the Federal Reserve was started, this dollar has lost over 96 to 97% of its purchasing power. Now, there is no such thing as perfectly stable purchasing power, but if you go back over the last 30 years and take a barrel of oil and compare it to the number of gold grams that it takes to buy a barrel of oil, it's pretty linear. When you look at it with dollar bills, it goes up like this. Another example, well, go back to later. Next thing is scarcity. Money must be scarce. In the example of cigarettes in the World War II concentration camps, it was scarce because all of Europe was at war. If they had not been at war, there would have been cigarette factories turning out more cigarettes so people could use it as money, and very quickly the cigarettes would not be scarce. Gold and silver are extremely scarce. And also in the monetary sense, actually, you know, a dollar is, in the monetary sense, it is scarce. And the last one must be reproducible. So for instance, like if you use diamonds as money, you need to somehow be able to reproduce it and have it be uniform. It just doesn't work. Next slide. Okay, now we can go back a little bit in time to the Revolution, the Revolutionary War back in 1776. And during that war, our nation, under George Washington, the bunch of rebels that they did not actually have a whole lot of gold and silver to buy munitions. So we went into debt, but what we started using was something called the Continental to pay all the troops. The Continental had no backing, and they weren't able to pay the troops, so they would just run the printing press. Next slide. They would run the printing press, and after the war, there was a calamity, because there were so many of these Continentals around that the phrase that some people are still familiar with these days, worth less than a Continental, came actually from the time of our founders. Here's a photo actually of a Continental. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to look at the United States Constitution. There are three key monetary clauses in the document. We'll go through them one by one. The first is that Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Now, this is a very distinct power given to them, but what it does not give them the right to do is to create money. If the government was allowed to create money, there would be no need to borrow it. Number two, the Congress shall have the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and a foreign coin, and fix the standards of weights and measures. You know, someone in 200 years later, looking back, would be like, fix the standard of weights and measures? What does that mean? And what it means is, Congress was given the right to define what is a dollar. They were given the right to define what mass of what metal would be considered a dollar. And also in Article 1, Section 10, no state shall coin money, emit bills of credit, which is what this is, or make anything but gold and silver a tender in payment of debts. So what they did was, and again, this is the state, they prohibited the states from actually making any bills of credit, which was a problem before the war. The founders understood that with money utilized, we would be able to generate pretty much a stable society and a lot of wealth. They had done a lot of studying. The Revolutionary War had taught them a lesson. And if you go back, I guess the 5,000-year leap is one example, but if you go back to China, actually about 2,000 years ago, the first Chinese emperor was carted around on a chariot. When George Washington went to his inauguration, he was also on a chariot pulled by some horses. There was technological advances, of course, but it was very few and far between. Over the last 200 years, under the gold standard, the world, led by America, actually made great technological advances